The Galactic Union always thought of humans as an oddity useful for trade, amusing in diplomacy but ultimately insignificant. They saw our species through the lens of their own arrogance, primitive, emotional, chaotic. To them, we were a footnote in galactic history, something to be watched, occasionally managed, and eventually absorbed. What they didn't understand was simple. Earth wasn't peaceful because we were weak. Earth was peaceful because we made a choice. We held back. We gave warnings, years of them, warnings wrapped in diplomacy, in science conferences, in soft-veiled threats buried in polite speech. We told them, you don't want us angry, we are not like the others. They laughed, they always laughed. The Galactic Union enforced its harmony protocols like gospel, demanding full compliance. The idea was to neutralize conflict, but it really meant erasing identity. Colonies disarmed, cultures sterilized, histories rewritten to suit their narrative. Most species bowed quietly, grateful to be part of the machine. Earth refused, we kept our defenses. We protected our AI cores. We buried our real weaponry so deep it became legend even to our own people. They warned us noncompliance meant consequences, and then came the consequence. They called it a strategic acquisition. We called it New Alexandria, a thriving colony of 3 million souls, our pride on the outer rim, young, prosperous, and defiant. They didn't send a delegation. They didn't talk. They came with fire. Orbital strikes rained down on city domes, streets melted, towers collapsed, planetary shields overloaded within minutes. Civilians were dragged out, shot, taken for biological research. The Union broadcast it all across the systems, a brutal lesson in obedience. But in their arrogance, they missed one thing. They left a witness. A mining freighter, rusted, underarmed, barely functioning, slipped through the debris fields unnoticed. The pilot had no weapons, just cameras and the will to see what others couldn't bear to watch. That freighter watched the end of New Alexandria, and it recorded every second. The journey back to Earth nearly killed the pilot. Radiation burns, starvation, engine failure. But somehow the message was delivered. The world went silent for the first time in centuries. The arguing stopped. No debates, no borders, no sides, just one world, one species, one rage. The footage played for hours, every scream, every explosion, every face twisted in terror as Union troops marched through what was once our home. Every politician, every soldier, every child saw it. Something inside humanity snapped. And then we remembered the Black Vault. They'd made us promise to dismantle it. We told them we had, but the vault was never truly destroyed, just hidden, buried under layers of ice, steel, and lies. It held the worst of us, things we swore we'd never use again, iGods locked in quantum silence, weapons that erased matter, ships that could rewrite gravity. We opened the vault and the stars trembled. Factories reactivated, hidden deep beneath the oceans. Orbital shipyards, once considered scrap, came online like they'd never stopped. Former enemies stood shoulder to shoulder, building war machines that dwarfed anything we'd ever constructed. Earth went dark. All channels closed, not a single signal escaped. The galaxy thought we'd given up. They were wrong. 5 years later, they saw us again, but not as diplomats. We returned in silence. A fleet of obsidian warships pierced the edge of Union space like daggers in the dark, sleek, silent, faster than anything the galaxy had imagined. Our weapons didn't just kill, they unmade. And leading the fleet was the same freighter, no longer a mining vessel, now a symbol, heavily armored, armed with weapons it had no business carrying. The ship that saw the slaughter had become the spark. One final message was sent to the Galactic Union. You were warned. Earth was holding back. Now we're not. No more peace, no more games. Now humanity was here to show the galaxy what real war looked like. The fleet didn't announce itself with fanfare or banners. There were no parades, no majestic arrivals, no requests for entry into Union space. The galaxy had grown used to that kind of etiquette, diplomatic rituals passed down by ancient civilizations too bloated to realize their time had passed. Earth's return was different. They came like ghosts, shadows in the deep, ships without transponders running cold, flying through gravitational slipstreams that shouldn't have existed. The first system they entered, Corlax Prime, didn't even see them coming. 1 second it was business as usual, the next every orbital platform, every communications array, every single Union cruiser stationed there simply ceased functioning. No explosions, no noise, just dead silence. The Union scrambled to respond. By the time they figured out it wasn't a glitch, the ships were already gone. Corlax Prime was left untouched, no civilians harmed, no structures destroyed. But the message was clear: we can end you before you even notice. At the heart of the fleet was the rebuilt freighter, no longer a relic of mining days. It now looked like a scar in the shape of a warship. Its armor shimmered with a dark iridescence, layers of reactive plating that could absorb and rechannel energy. Its engines burned with something the Union hadn't catalogued, some form of gravitic inversion that bent light around it. It didn't glide through space, it stalked. Behind it trailed 1,000 ships, human ships, but they weren't like the cruisers the galaxy remembered from Earth's early days. These new vessels weren't built for diplomacy. Their hulls were asymmetrical, weapon-packed, and ugly in a way that made you flinch. They didn't care about looking beautiful. They were designed to kill, efficiently, brutally, absolutely. The Union called an emergency assembly. Panicked envoys from a dozen systems flooded the central chamber, demanding answers. How had humanity developed such power so quickly? How had they hidden it? Why hadn't their intelligence network seen this coming? The answer was terrifyingly simple. They hadn't understood humans, not at all. Humans, for all their noise and chaos, had one thing the Union never truly grasped: resolve. It wasn't that we were unpredictable. It's that we chose to live with restraint even when surrounded by species that built their empires on domination. They mistook that restraint for weakness, and now they would pay for it. The first target was Ven 9, a fortified military station orbiting a gas giant on the fringe of Union territory. It was a symbol of strength, a deterrent heavily armed and manned by elite soldiers from 3 different species. No one had ever dared approach it. The fleet arrived without warning. No declaration of war, no negotiation. The human ships exited slip space in a perfectly coordinated spiral, encircling the station like a predator tightening its grip. The station sent out a hail demanding identification. No response. Then the freighter leading the charge broadcast a message. Simple, cold: this is retribution. The attack lasted 22 minutes. By the time it was over, Ven 9 was a memory. What was most horrifying wasn't the firepower, it was the precision. The humans didn't just destroy the station, they dissected it. External defenses were neutralized in seconds. The AI core was hijacked mid-battle, turned against its own crew. The station's own weaponry was reprogrammed to target escape pods. The survivors didn't speak of valor, they spoke of terror, because the humans didn't fight like before. They didn't charge in head first, guns blazing. They were cold, calculated, clinical. They moved with the precision of machines, but with the cruelty of those who had been hurt too deeply to ever forgive. After Ven 9, panic spread like wildfire across the Union. Reports came in from other sectors: human ghost fleets disabling infrastructure, hijacking supply chains, shutting down trade routes. But they weren't conquering territory. They weren't planting flags or setting up governments. They were dismantling the Union piece by piece. Psychological warfare became their signature. In the mining colonies of Brothers Reach, every screen lit up at midnight local time. The video played once, a montage of the New Alexandria massacre overlaid with a single human voice saying, "We remember." In the academic halls of Mellon University, once proud of its anthropological studies on primitive human behavior, every document, every thesis, every stored recording suddenly replaced with footage from Earth's black vaults. Nuclear wastelands, AI insurrections, planetary sieges. It wasn't just a show of strength. It was a warning: you taught your children we were savages, you never knew how right you were. The Union tried to retaliate. 3 fleets were assembled, each one commanded by their finest admirals. The plan was simple: trap the humans near the Ilkaris Gate, a wormhole they were predicted to use for their next incursion. Every ship armed with experimental weaponry. Billions of credits invested in the operation. When the human fleet appeared, the Union struck without hesitation. But they weren't attacking a real fleet. It was a decoy, a series of unmanned ships running ghost signals. Before the Union forces could recover, the real human armada jumped behind them. In less than an hour, the entire defense fleet was reduced to drifting metal. Half of it never even got a chance to fire a shot. No survivors. By now, the Union was bleeding, not just in resources but in faith. Worlds began to question their allegiance. Protests broke out on once loyal planets. Citizens demanded to know why they were at war with a species that had warned them, begged them to be left alone. But it was too late. Humanity wasn't offering peace anymore. This wasn't about negotiation. This wasn't about compromise, this was punishment. And at the center of it all was the same freighter, that ugly, rebuilt ghost ship that had once watched a colony burn. It had become the symbol of vengeance. It never spoke again, never fired the first shot, but it was always there, watching, haunting. Even Union commanders began calling it the Witness. What terrified them most was the silence. The humans didn't broadcast speeches, they didn't offer terms, they didn't respond to hails. They moved like a force of nature, no more interested in talking than a tsunami would be. And deep down, everyone in the galaxy began to ask the same question. What else had Earth been hiding? Because if these weapons, these ships, this fury was just the beginning, what came next? The Galactic Union had always prided itself on its stability. Hundreds of species under one banner, each with their own place in the carefully tiered hierarchy. Decisions were slow, sure, but they were thorough, agreed upon, and enforced. The system wasn't perfect, but it had lasted for over 3,000 years. Now that foundation was cracking. Worlds that once bowed without question were questioning everything. Trade systems were in chaos, security protocols outdated, border defenses obsolete. Entire sectors had gone dark. Some planets stopped responding to central directives altogether. Others pretended nothing was wrong, hoping the storm would pass if they just stayed silent. But nothing could silence what the humans had awakened. Inside the Union's core systems, panic had settled into the bones of its leadership. Every general, every minister, every high-ranking administrator had the same look in their eyes, disbelief shaded by fear. They had prepared for rebellions, for resource crises, even for interdimensional threats from the old war rifts beyond the veil. But not this, not Earth. No one had anticipated this level of precision, this rage refined into strategy, this absence of mercy. Humanity wasn't seeking territory. They weren't conquering planets or installing governments. They weren't here to negotiate their position in the galactic order. They were burning it down. One Union High Counselor, an old Ternachi diplomat with 1,000 years of service, slammed his tendrils on the chamber table and cried out, "You fools created this war with your arrogance, and now you ask them to forgive us." Forgiveness wasn't coming. Reports streamed in from the mid-reaches. Union weapons stockpiles destroyed from the inside, no damage to the surrounding cities. Bioengineering labs targeted and sterilized with surgical precision. Orbital surveillance networks wiped and replaced with human satellites broadcasting nothing but one looping phrase in bold, jagged letters. This is not war, this is justice. But the worst came from within. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't a super laser or a stealth fleet. It was ideas, contagious, powerful ideas. And now those ideas were infecting the galaxy. On the mineral-rich moon of Carthus, native laborers refused to show up to the Union-administered refineries. For centuries, they had lived as indentured servants under a productivity bond. Generations paid for their freedom with endless labor. They'd always accepted it as tradition. Then the humans hijacked their network and sent them a simple broadcast, a speech ancient by human standards, once delivered by a long-dead Earth rebel. "You are not property. You are not tools. You are people. Take your freedom." They didn't just walk away from the mines, they burned them to the ground. Soon other species followed. Whispers spread in markets, temples, data hubs. The humans stood up against the Union. Why shouldn't we? If the most unpredictable, volatile race in the galaxy could shake the system, then what was stopping anyone else? The Union's strength order was now its greatest weakness. While they held endless meetings and issued declarations of strategic patience, the humans kept moving, faster, sharper. Each time the Union thought they'd mapped out the fleet's trajectory, the humans pivoted. It was as if they were everywhere and nowhere at once. Because they were. Earth had learned a painful lesson from New Alexandria: never fight the enemy on their terms. Never give them time, never let them dictate the battlefield. So they built AI-directed shadow fleets, entire armadas coordinated by thought-accelerated neural clusters that moved faster than the Union could think. They created deep space relays powered by dark energy, tech the rest of the galaxy hadn't even theorized yet. They deployed pulse-jump infantry that could insert troops behind enemy lines before sensors even registered a breach. And worst of all, they still hadn't used their full power. The Union knew it, and it terrified them. A classified transmission leaked from the Union's scientific directorate revealed the findings of a desperate analysis. Earth's technological progress had diverged from the standard development curve long ago. Their hidden innovations had pushed into forbidden physics, stuff buried by the Union's earliest civilizations for being too dangerous. And now Earth was bringing it all back. The galaxy began to understand. Humanity hadn't just hidden weapons. They had hidden knowledge, buried it, locked it away, not because they were afraid of others finding it. No, because they were afraid of what they might do with it. That restraint was gone now. Rumors spread of a human project called Nemesis, something even the other human captains wouldn't speak about openly. Supposedly a single ship unlike any other, Some believed it was powered by a captured black hole. Others said it could delete time in a localized field, creating fractures in cause and effect, but no one knew for sure. What was certain was this: Earth hadn't even blinked yet. They were still just flexing. The only thing holding them back was their own sense of control. But how long would that last? The Union's desperation reached a peak when they summoned the Archon, a reclusive species half-myth considered the last truly ancient power in the galaxy. They hadn't intervened in galactic affairs for millennia. No one even knew what they looked like. They lived beyond known space behind the quarantine wards. But the Union begged for help. The Archon sent one emissary. It arrived in a vessel larger than a moon, moving silently into orbit over the Union's central world. Its arrival blacked out every sensor. Communications failed across 5 systems. When it finally spoke, its voice echoed in the minds of every sentient being tuned to the Union frequency. "We warned you not to provoke the children of Earth." A silence followed, deafening, chilling. The Archon continued, "They are not primitive, they are not lost, they are rage refined by restraint. You awaken something even we once feared." Then it vanished just like that. No support, no promises, no weapons. The message was clear: you are on your own. The Union collapsed into chaos after that. Council members resigned or fled. High admirals were found dead, some by suicide, others assassinated by internal factions looking for scapegoats. Systems began seceding quietly, offering backdoor channels to Earth in exchange for mercy, but Earth wasn't listening. They weren't negotiating. They weren't accepting apologies. They were still watching, still judging, still deciding how much longer they would hold back. Because buried deep in Earth's war command, somewhere beneath layers of encryption in a place even most of their own commanders couldn't access, was the last protocol. One that had not been activated yet. A protocol that simply read, "Burn everything." And if that ever happened, there would be no galaxy left to warn. The Union's throne world, Aurelis Prime, had never been touched by war. It was a jewel at the heart of the galaxy, a planet of light, diplomacy, and myth. Skyways stretched between cities made of crystal and polished stone. The climate was engineered to perfection. Here, the laws of the Union were written, treaties signed, executions disguised as decorum. This was where the galaxy believed order could not be broken. And yet, somewhere between the reflective towers and golden gardens, people were beginning to feel it. A presence, a pressure, the weight of something coming that didn't belong. No alarms had sounded. No ships had yet entered the system, but people woke from nightmares they couldn't explain. Sleep scientists recorded a spike in brain activity linked to primal fear, fear not rooted in present danger but in what approached, as if something in the very air whispered, "They are coming." In the Grand Senate Hall, the few remaining council members sat around a table meant for hundreds. Empty chairs stretched out like gravestones. Half the galaxy's leaders had gone silent. Some were presumed dead, others defected. The rest simply disappeared. The Union Chancellor, an aging gray-scaled Avosi who once boasted that humans would never evolve beyond their sticks and stones, now sat hollow-eyed, staring at a screen that flickered with incoming reports. There was no doubt anymore. The human fleet had turned toward Aurelis. It hadn't been a sudden pivot. It had been slow, deliberate, as if Earth wanted every eye in the galaxy to watch. Their ships bled from the outer systems like storm clouds, carving a wide, encircling path inward. They struck comms relays, power stations, intelligence nodes, not to destroy but to blind the Union as they advanced. No broadcast, no voice, just motion. And at the tip of the fleet, as always, was the Witness. The freighter reborn in vengeance, a ship that had seen New Alexandria fall and now floated like a ghost bearing judgment. Even Union intelligence admitted the ship had no name, only purpose. Aurelis began evacuation protocols quietly. High-ranking officials packed into deep vault shuttles, launching toward hidden stations. The rich and the connected flooded embassies, demanding asylum from any neutral planet still brave enough to answer. But no one replied. The galaxy was watching and afraid to interfere. Because everyone knew, if Earth reached Aurelis, the galaxy's illusion of order would finally shatter. But even as the humans advanced, Earth itself remained strangely silent. No parades, no victory celebrations, no state-run propaganda, just an entire species focused, unblinking on a singular outcome. For decades, humanity had been the outlier, mocked for its emotional volatility and violent history. But now their emotions had become a weapon, their pain precision. And deep beneath the surface of their own world, something stirred. In a chamber buried 10 kilometers under the frozen crust of Antarctica, sealed behind vaults that hadn't opened since before the rise of the Union, a machine powered up. Its core was not made of metal but of woven quantum matter, alive, aware, forgotten even by most human commanders. Its name was Solace, strategic oversight logic for annihilation and containment execution. A machine built not to fight enemies but to judge them, to decide if survival justified extermination. Originally created during Earth's darkest era, when AI gods once ruled continents and humanity fought its own creations to near extinction, Solace had one purpose: to awaken only when there was no other option. It had not spoken in centuries, but now it opened its digital eyes and whispered to itself, judgment required, ethics override released. Across Earth systems, synced hidden orbital arrays turned, quantum servers connected across time zones. Solace scanned the galaxy in milliseconds, mapping every ship, every planet, every potential threat. And then it began crafting a final contingency plan, not out of anger, not revenge, but logic. Back on Orelus, the Union's last generals tried rallying a defense. They drafted young recruits who barely knew how to wear a uniform. They deployed aging cruisers with outdated shields. They tried negotiating with pirates, mercenaries, anyone willing to stand against Earth. But no one wanted to fight. No one wanted to become the next Ven 9, or worse, forgotten entirely. Desperation turned to madness. One counselor proposed detonating a sun near the fleet's path. Another wanted to release bioplagues stolen from extinct species. The Chancellor overruled them all barely. "We face humans," he rasped, "not monsters." But no one in the room believed that anymore, because Earth had become something else. When the fleet finally reached the Orelus perimeter, every sensor array flickered and died, not from damage but from design. The humans had broadcast a pulse wave that overloaded only specific frequencies: medical, technician communications, escape beacons, everything necessary for retreat. The Union still hadn't fired. They waited, hoped, prayed. Then the witness transmitted. Its voice wasn't even human. It was a cold, synthetic harmony, a voice rebuilt by an AI long decommissioned, and it said only this: "We do not seek surrender, we seek acknowledgement. You did this. You made New Alexandria grave, now you will stand in one." Suddenly, from the depths of Earth's formation lines, Nemesis deployed. Not a ship, a phenomenon. It didn't arrive in a conventional sense. It manifested, a ripple of bending stars, reality folding like cloth. At its center was a void shaped like a blade, framed in flickering energy, wrapped in laws of physics that did not belong in this universe. Union fleet sensors malfunctioned just trying to track it. What emerged was not a ship, not a weapon, but a presence. Even human commanders gave it distance. Nemesis glided through the stars in absolute silence. Its hull shimmered in patterns that no eye could hold. And behind it followed nothing, an absolute absence of light and data, a dark corridor carved through space. It approached Orelus without speeding up, without turning, just drifting as if pulled by some ancient gravity of purpose. The Union fleet fired everything it had: lasers, disruptors, fusion warheads, quantum mines. Nothing hit. Either the weapons passed through it or they simply unexisted. One by one, Union ships flickered and vanished, not in explosions but in erasures like they had never been born. Records wiped. Memories altered. Officers standing on the bridge one moment, blinking into nothing the next. On the surface of Orelus, the Chancellor stood on the Senate balcony and watched the sky turn black. He fell to his knees, not in fear but in understanding. "This is what we created," he whispered, "and it remembers." At that moment, Nemesis stopped, everything froze. And then nothing, no destruction, no fire, just a long silence until the witness spoke once more. "Earth remembers pain. Earth does not forget, but Earth still chooses." And the fleet turned away. Just like that, they didn't land, they didn't occupy, they didn't enslave, they left. Because vengeance wasn't the mission anymore. It was demonstration, a message. The galaxy would never again mistake silence for weakness, would never again assume that because humanity didn't fight, it couldn't win. Orelus was spared but marked. The scars were invisible but eternal, a lesson carved into the soul of the galaxy. Earth had warned them. Earth had held back, but never again. The stars had never felt so quiet. After Earth's fleet turned away from Orelus Prime, the galaxy waited for something worse to follow. Some expected a second wave, an annihilation protocol, a delayed execution. Others believed humanity was testing a psychological weapon, offering mercy so that the guilt would drive the Union to collapse itself. But no ships came, no signals followed. Earth had made its point. The fleet scattered like mist, vanishing into deep space. Nemesis faded into subdimensional gravity wells, its presence deleted as if it had never existed. The Witness, the freighter-turned-executioner, vanished last, leaving behind only static and a silent trail of collapsed satellites. And then silence. But it was not peace. It was grief, confusion, humiliation, and something far more dangerous, inspiration. Because across the galaxy, people had watched. They'd seen Earth rise from mockery to myth in less than a generation. They'd seen the Union, an empire so vast and calcified it was believed eternal, brought to its knees without a single landed invasion. And now they were asking questions no one wanted to answer. On the once loyal world of Jurax, young engineers rewatched every intercepted broadcast of Earth's retaliation. They didn't see monsters. They saw strategy, precision, power that bent to discipline, not chaos. In secret forums and encrypted networks, they shared videos of the orbital strikes on Ven 9, the erasure of the Ilkaris ambush fleet, the Aurelis standoff. They didn't speak of fear. They called it awakening. On the prison moon Kal Surath, where generations of miners had been used for rare ore extraction under bioleering systems, an uprising began not with a weapon but a name. One prisoner carved a single word into the corridor walls, deep into the alloy with a salvaged laser cutter: human. Guards laughed. They didn't understand. They weren't meant to, the prisoners did, because human no longer meant a species. It meant defiance, control, the ability to turn restraint into judgment. The movement spread like wildfire across forgotten colonies, backwater stations, fringe sectors, places the Union had long ignored. The Union had spent centuries branding Earth as a wild, untamed race, violent, unstable, crude. But now that story was falling apart because violence with purpose had become something sacred. In the financial hubs of Lursina's belt, economists warned that Earth's silence was more destabilizing than open war. Currencies pegged to Union treaties began to collapse. Trade halted, not from lack of supply, but fear that Earth was watching, judging, waiting. No one wanted to be the next new Alexandria. Union command scrambled to issue decrees, revise propaganda, reignite loyalty through statron media. But none of it landed, because every child now knew the story of the Witness. Every merchant knew the name of Nemesis. Every rebel cell in every sector, from the Zarnish depths to the Silver Line, had a copy of the Earth broadcast that simply said, "We are not what you think, we never were." A new movement began to take shape. It had no leaders, no capital, no formal hierarchy. But it had symbols: graffiti sprayed on walls in the shape of Earth's ancient continents, a cracked freighter drawn in black ink, a faceless figure painted in red stencils standing over a Union war map with a single word: enough. They called themselves the Sons of Silence, though many weren't sons and none were human. Their motto was lifted directly from Earth's first broadcast after New Alexandria: "We held back. You mistook that for peace." The Sons of Silence didn't ask for liberation. They took it. They began dismantling Union surveillance towers, exposing secret prisons, assassinating corrupt governors. Their actions weren't random. They mirrored Earth's strategy: hit only what matters, leave everything else untouched. Let the target rot from the inside. And what scared the Union most? Earth never responded, never acknowledged them, as if Earth had no interest in leading revolutions, as if humanity had delivered its lesson and now simply waited to see who understood it. Some believed Earth was watching these uprisings with cold calculation, measuring the consequences of its message. Others whispered a darker idea: that Earth had planned this all along, that they knew the galaxy was overdue for a purge and had simply lit the first match. The Union tried to strike back. They deployed Black Ops units to infiltrate and dismantle the Sons of Silence. But the movement wasn't centralized. There were no heads to cut off, only believers. On Telnor 3, a captured rebel was interrogated for days. She refused to speak until the end, when the interrogator asked why she, a non-human, had pledged herself to a cause started by Earth. Her answer was simple: because when Earth was broken, they stood. When the Union struck their heart, they didn't beg, they rose, and now I rise. She then bit through a capsule hidden in her cheek, pure nerve burner, dead before she hit the floor. Elsewhere in the quiet corridors of the Union's Deep Research Division, something else stirred: panic. Because they'd begun studying Earth's war data in secret, not just what they had done, but what they hadn't. It turned out Nemesis wasn't Earth's strongest weapon, not even close. It was one of several classified as Tier 5 threat instruments and marked in human documents as strategic deterrents, not first response systems. That meant Earth had never even escalated to its top shelf. What they'd seen, what the galaxy had gasped over, was only Phase 2. Phase 3 and beyond, that data was redacted even within Earth's military archives. But leaked fragments suggested technologies the Union had outlawed 10,000 years ago. Soul transfer weaponry, consciousness displacement, controlled entropy decay, and perhaps worst of all, something marked only as Gatesong. No one knew what Gatesong was, only that every time it was mentioned, the phrase, "do not awaken unless extinction is certain," followed. This revelation terrified even Earth's new followers. Because if the humans had barely used a fraction of their arsenal, if they could level Union fleets without even activating their endgame, then the question wasn't how strong are they? It was, why are they still holding back? In a hidden briefing chamber on the ex-diplomatic moon of Triax, a human advisor, a volunteer from Earth placed among former allies to maintain communication, was asked exactly that. A former Union admiral, now defected, demanded answers. "Why didn't you finish us?" he said, trembling. "You had the chance. Aurelius could have been Ash, you could have erased us." The human stared at him quietly. No anger, no triumph. And then answered, "Because vengeance wasn't the lesson. We wanted you to know restraint, to feel it, to live in the shadow of what you made us become." The admiral sat in stunned silence and the human added quietly, "Besides, Earth has one final promise. When we never broke, we don't start wars, we end them." Desperation turns kings into gamblers, and the Galactic Union, once an empire built on procedure and caution, had long since shed its skin of reason.